everyone, welcome back to this baby gown sew-along series. This video is a little bit different of a format than the other three. I'm going to show you how I made this handkerchief linen baby gown, and it's kind of a fun color, isn't it? Now, handkerchief linen comes in a ton of different colors, so if you want to stick with something a little bit more classic, go ahead and do that, but it's like a little bit fun to branch out every now and again. So that's what I did with this one. It's kind of like a seafoam green, and it's got all this yummy embroidery work on it. So what I did to create this is I took the pattern piece, and this is very similar to the shadow smocked on that voile gown that's in the series. Took the pattern piece. With both of those gowns, you do the double fold down that center front, center back, and then you do a single fold on the shoulders. And I just laid everything out. I didn't do any cutting, and then that allowed me to trace the embroidery motif onto the gown. So once I had the embroidery motif traced onto the fabric, then I used the cotton embroider. And you're going to have two sizes in your little kit that I've got together for the Summer Sew-Along series. So you've got two sizes of cotton embroider, one size 16 and one size 25, and I have really sat down with the camera. I mean, the camera was in one spot, I had the big old microphone in their spot. I was like this, doing my embroidery stuff. So bear with me with the footage, but we are going to go on to the footage to show you how to do it. I wanted to get it as up close and as slowed down as possible, so I worked everything in real time as I was talking about it, and I hope that it is helpful.
Alright, so to do these sleeves, I'm going to be using size 16 cotton embroider, and you can see that it's size 16 because that's the number next to this little N. So that means that it's, well, size 16. And size 16 is the largest size in cotton embroider. And then to pull it out, with any cotton embroider, I pull it out, and this is the same that goes with the floss as well. I pull it out from the long side. So this is the long label over here as opposed to this label, which is shorter. I pull it out from the long side. I feel like I just have better success rate over that. And cotton embroider, it tends to want to loop up on itself. So if you feel like you're pulling at it and it's getting kind of tangled or it's getting to be a hot mess, it probably is. You probably need to stop and see what's going on. So anyway, I am using, like I said, size 16, and I am putting it in this like sharp millimeter needle, whatever it is. I just grab one that looks like it'll do the job well, and you can see that I like all these needles to have the eye of the needle to be basically in line, the same width as the diameter of the needle. I just find that those are the needles I gravitate towards, and they do well for me. So first we're going to do the padding of this leaf. And we're not going to tie on. I know that that's the proper way to do things, although I have mixed feelings about it. But in this case, we're not going to tie on, and it's going to be just fine. So I'm going to start on the top of my work, and I'm just going to have this little bit of tail that I am going to conceal. And we're just going to do the padding for this leaf. So I am pulling my little tail off to the side as I'm starting this around, and after a little while it's not going to matter, it's just going to be secure. So I like to do the backwards running stitch whenever I'm doing padding. Some people do just the running stitch, but I find that the backwards running stitch really gives you, I don't know, it just gives you the outline of the whole thing, which I find to be beneficial later on when I'm doing the satin stitches. Alright, I think that's a little bit better. Camera work and embroidery work, I find that the two, for me, do not go together all that well. But I do my best. So these stitches do not need to be pretty. These stitches just need to be around the outline of the shape. In this case, it's a little leaf for what I'm doing. But it doesn't need to be pretty, you just need to be around the shape. So as long as the lines are following that curve, you're good to go. And at this point, I'm going to trim up this thing a little bit. And here we are finishing up the outline. So that is padding the outline of the shape, and now we're going to fill in the padding for the inside of the shape. And these certainly do not need to be pretty, they are just providing some padding. So I'm going from one side to the next. And you can see that's also doing this lovely thing of concealing that little bit of tail that was left. So you just want to fill in this whole space. And I think I need to come back and put another little stitch here. Got a little bit of a gap. This is definitely a very forgiving process. The padding is, at least. The next step, it's definitely doable, but it's not as forgiving. But you can do it. So now we have our padding, you see? You can kind of rub your finger over it and you can feel that it's all filled in and all of that goodness. So I'm just gonna come up and I'm going to slide my needle underneath the padded stitches, because that's how I'm going to conceal that thread, and I'm not going to add any knots. You're not going to need any knots. Even a warrior like I am about knots, it's all good. You're about to see this is going to be wrapped up like a nice neat little package. So I am grabbing now size 25. And again, you know it's size 25 because that's the number next to the N. So once again, I am going to pull out from that long label side, and I'm going to pull out one, and this is exactly what I was talking about. It's starting to give me some resistance, so I'm looking, and sure enough, I've got myself a little bit of a hot mess. Cotton embroider is unfortunately known for this. So you can see I've got loops within loops. So I'm just going to look and see what's going on and go from there. So I love the fiber, but for whatever reason, it does this stuff. Alright, so once again to start, I'm going to go underneath those padded stitches, and now we are going to do the satin part of the padded satin stitch. This is a very, what am I going to try to say? It's a very loved stitch in white work. It's a very popular stitch in white work. So you can also do this where you like pierce the thread. So let me pull the tail all the way so it's concealed underneath all those stitches. And something that you can do is pierce that thread, and that adds a little bit of a layer of security to it. It's not necessary to do it, but it does add a little bit of layer of security in lieu of a knot. So I'm going to start at the end of the leaf without the tail, because I'm just going to take this and continue into the tail. So I'm going to start over here, and you want to set yourself up so that your stitches are 90 degrees to your object. Does that make sense? So you kind of want to picture like this is 90 degrees ish, you know, to the object. So if you can picture a little 90 degree there. My stitches never look as good when I'm recording them because I have all this stuff in the way. I'm like, if you could see me now, I'm squished between a microphone and the big old camera with the lens on it, trying to get, you know, up close and personal, and I'm just in with everybody. So bear with me if my stitches are not as good as you see them otherwise. But so the goal is, okay, so you're going to come up on one side. Now, generally people do better stitches on one side than the other. With me, I have a better like line on the side that I come up than the side that I come down, generally speaking. I'm not sure why that is, but that's just the case. And you can see I am trying to space this out goodness. I keep knocking my head into the camera, which is why it's moving a little bit. Like I said, I'm smashed in here like a sardine, but I am trying to move just one thread width apart. So right now I am trying to see one thread width apart. That way there's no gaps, but I also don't want my thread and my stitches to be on top of themselves. This part, the padding of the padded satin stitch is really quite easy and beginner friendly, and the satin part of it takes a little bit of practice. You can definitely do this, but it does take a little bit of practice. So if your stitches are looking a little bit they're trying to discourage you, just don't let them, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, keep going. With a little bit of practice, you will get something that you are happy with, but it does take some practice. I don't want you to think that, you know, my stitches just started out like this from the get-go, and they still have some ways to go, but that's all right. It's all part of the process and the journey, and, you know, perfection for me, it's not the goal. The goal is to enjoy yourself and to have something at the end that you are happy with, and just because it's not perfect doesn't mean you can't be happy with it. It's handmade. Alright, so here you can see I didn't quite go just one thread apart. I went a little bit more and there's a little bit of a gap, so I'm just going to come back and now go just fill in that gap, and that's fine. That happens. What is it, sweetie? Sure. So you just kind of pull that in and it settles right into there, you see? And so this is the part where you just take your time. It's really going to determine how good your motif looks, is how good these satin stitches look. So just take your time and enjoy the process. The other thing I want to say is that it is helpful to kind of angle your needle towards your motif. So let me show you. As I'm coming up, I am angling it, you know, kind of this way. Does that make sense? So I'm angling it around, and then I am angling it towards the outline. So I'm going to finish this leaf while I'm not surrounded by camera equipment. Alright, so you can see the top part of this leaf, it looks a little rough because that's the part I did on camera, and the bottom part looks better because, like I said, my stitches always look better off camera. It is really hard, I find, to do all this up close embroidery work, camera work, all of it, and have everything go smoothly. So I sort of have a love-hate relationship with filming detailed embroidery work, but such is life. I will try to clean it up off camera. Now I'm doing the stem, and whichever way the stem curves is where I want to pull my thread down. That's how I like to do it. So I'll do this, I think this is called the stem stitch, when your thread's below your needle. The stem and the outline stitch, they're basically one and the same. One goes above, one goes below your needle. But I like to keep the thread below my needle, or sorry, I like to keep my thread on the side where the curve is like concave up, if you will. So if you can imagine, this is a little smiley face. I like to keep my thread on like the bottom lip. I hope that analogy helps. It's a little silly, but so this is how I do the stem of the leaf. And then I will just put this down here, and I'm going to flip my hoop around to show you how I tie off. Now, some people will just slide their needle through some of these back stitches and they will call it done. Knots are not like proper. I'm not sure who set that rule, but they're not proper in embroidery work. I, though, get a little bit nervous about that, especially because my stuff is like, I don't know, I just get nervous. So I'll do a little bit of a loop, a little bit of a knot, and then I will trim up that tail, because you want to keep the back of your work tidy. Something like that. Alright, so these eyelets you can do with or without a hoop. The leaf, though, the padded satin stitch, I really recommend using a hoop, particularly if you're new to it. I think it makes a world of difference. But anyhow, so these eyelets you can do, I'm doing these circles as eyelets, and like I said, you can do them with or without a hoop. I am going to start on the top of my work, and these are super easy to do. You will just be amazed with how easy these are. So I'm starting at the top of my work. This is the tail that I'm going to trim off in a second. I've got a little bit of my thread back here, and I'm about to go over that, okay? And that's what's going to secure this down without having knots. So I'm going to pick the middle of the circle, middle-ish, whatever, of that circle. Sorry, I just bumped my head onto the camera. And you're going to pull tight, okay? And that's going to create this little hole. You're going to go through that same hole again. It's very important you go through that same hole again, and then come to the outside of the circle again. And pull tight. And you can see how these little wraps, these stitches, are going over that little part of thread. So that's what's securing that thread down without using any knots. And now that I am approaching the tail of my thread, I'm going to trim that up. And there's no cutting with this eyelet. It's going to be on the small side, so you don't have to worry about cutting it. There's no need for a use of an awl, although you can put an awl in it when you're done, just to kind of like give it that circular polished shape, but you don't have to have one. And you just go around, going in the same hole, going to the outside of your circle, and you repeat that. This is using the size 25 cotton border. And okay, so cotton border goes up to size 30. Size 30 is smaller than size 25. It gives an absolutely just super refined look. Size 25 I love. Size 30 you have to have more patience with, because you're going to have more stitches with. There's more opportunity for gaps and things like that. So size 25 is something, it's easier than size 30, but if you have the patience and the skill for size 30, it is like, I don't know, the icing on the cake or something. It looks so nice. That's got to be a really special project for me, especially where I am right now in life with all the little ones. Size 30, it's like it's a lot more time. Anyhow, so the other thing I want to mention is that while you're working with a hoop, this is just any time you're working in a hoop, you want to stab your fabric with your needle and leave your fingers out of the mix. Your fingers really should not be touching your fabric. I mean, if they just, like mine is literally just grazing my fabric right now. But they should not poke into your fabric. That will cause your fabric to have a deformation there where your finger is, and there is really no way to get around that. You're just going to have a little bubble there. And it's a bit unfortunate. So, here we are at the beginning of our circle. We're going to do our last stitch. And we have our little eyelet. Isn't that sweet? Super easy, super beginner friendly, and it looks so impressive, right? So going back to this whole no knot thing, some people like to send their thread through like the back stitches, just like they'll put it through like that. I don't like to do that. I'm not even going to demonstrate it because I really don't like the way it looks on my work. I feel like it just pulls at those stitches and it gets them out of whack. So what I like to do instead is I will just take, am I in frame? There we go. I will take the slightest little bite on the edge of that eyelet, and that's going to have that little bite is just basically going to disappear on the edge of the eyelet. You're really not going to see it, but it allows that last stitch to get cinched down and not worry about that. And then when you go to the back of your work, I just make this tiny little knot. I know it's not proper, but it's what I like to do, and I hope y'all aren't hearing Peppa Pig in the background. That's what's getting us through this video. And then I will just trim off a little bit like that. And that's how I like to, that's the best way I found for me. I'll just say that. It's sewing you to you, but that's the best way I found for me. Alright, so now I'm going to show you guys how to do the granadas. That's these like kind of padded circular things. They aren't hard, but there is a little bit of a learning curve. So if they're not coming out, I mean, even mine can use improvement, right? There's always improvement to be made. But we just do our best and we enjoy it, and that's the important thing. So with that in mind, let's start our granado, shall we? There's absolutely no need for a knot, even the warriors of the knot world like I am. There's no need for a knot because you're going to go over your thread a gajillion times. I am just ever so slightly placing my finger there so I don't get any deformations. But yeah, so a granado is a stitch where you go from point A to point B over and over and over again. And in most, well, really, every explanation I've heard from a granado is just that. You go from point A to point B over and over and over again, alternating until you have this lovely, plump circular thing. I want to add a little bit to that though, because I don't think that's the entire picture. Well, first of all, you can see that my point over here between my eyelet, there's like maybe like a 1/16 of an inch, maybe like a 32nd. There's a tiny bit of a gap on purpose because this thing's going to plump up, and I still want that eyelet to be visible. I don't want this to just completely plump up and invade the eyelet, okay? So I like to have a tiny bit of a gap for doing this. The other thing with granados is I typically like to do them out of the hoop, but with filming being already so difficult for me, I decided it was best to keep her in the hoop. That way I'm not like going which way and every way with my hands. Do you know? So from there, you're going to want to alternate. And so I like to alternate my stitches until I have the shape of the circle mostly filled in. That's the first thing that I can tell you. That's the first detail that I want to say that, I mean, teachers really don't, they just say alternate, back and forth, back and forth. And if there's not some method to your alternating, you can get yourself into a hot mess of these stitches one way and the other way, and at least that's what I have found. So I like to, like I said, have this all fill in my shape. I need to go a little bit more on this side, so I'm just gonna keep this down. And I need a couple more on this side. These also go much faster when you have them out of the hoop. But that's okay. So this is more or less filling in that circle. And so now, once I have the shape filled in, I think mine's a little bit crooked. Again, I'm filming, but bear with me. So once you have most of that shape filled in, now what I like to do is I will go from the left to the right, and I will make the top look pretty. So you can kind of imagine this is like a round of satin stitches going through the same point, you know, those same 2 points we've been going through this whole time, but now you're just going to make a round of satin stitches. And you don't want any gaps, so you can see I have a gap right there, so I'm going to try to place this next stitch right in there, and of course you can use your fingers ever so lightly to guide her in and kind of cinch it down. I need one more over there. That was quite the gap, wasn't it? Alright, so you want them to be satin stitches, you don't want them to twist or anything. The other thing, oh, I just lost my thread. The other thing is that, what was I going to say? Oh, so the other thing is that I like to keep my thread to the left. I'm working left to right with my stitches, and I find that keeping my thread, you can see I pull it over here to the left. It just, it moves it out of the way, and it helps it from getting all twisted up. So the oh, and another trick is that you can just, you know, visually, like, oh, where should this go, and you can put it there. Or like if you're not sure if there should be another stitch, if like you have like a slight gap but you're not sure if there should be another stitch there or not, you can just place it in and see how it looks. And I'm almost done doing this little round of satin stitches, if you will, to finish up this granado. This is a great stitch to have under your belt. It's so classic, it's so fun. You can, I mean, of course, do the whole classic white work with it, but you can, it lends itself so well to fun motifs, right? Like little ducks and little splashes, or just amongst flowers, more modern stuff. It's such a great thing to have in your arsenal. Alright, so I need some down here to kind of make that transition smooth. From the fabric to my granado. And I think I need a couple more on top, and then I am going to be done. Every granado comes together just slightly different than the last. Some of them I will do a round of I call them I've been calling them satin stitches, that last round, and it looks all good and dandy. Some of them I need to come back and just go over a little bit, areas like this one needs a little bit more in the center. They all sort of come together a little bit differently. And I also have not been able to do two granados that look anywhere similar. So it's just part of handmade. You embrace it. Something like that. You can also rub your fingers and kind of get the threads to blend together some more. But that's something like that. So then this becomes very easy to tie off. All you're going to do is you're going to go underneath that granado a few times. I almost lost my thread again. So you just go underneath of it. There's so much padding at this point. It's going to secure that thread down. You don't need to worry about it. Those are the stitches that you need to know to do this, at least how I've done it. Of course, you can take this and run with it. It is sewing, you do you. There's a multitude of ways to embroider this motif, but that's the way I'm embroidering it for the sew-along, and I hope that is helpful.
So now that you have your embroidery work done, how did I finish putting this together? Well, as you can see on your pattern piece, you actually have some additional embroidery for the sleeves as well as the hem, and you can continue the whole process of like the padded satin stitch for the little scallops around the sleeve and the hem. Okay, it's the same thing as with the leaves that you just saw on that on the embroidery tutorial. I didn't do that though. I just kept things. I just had enough on my plate, and I would love to just sit down and embroider my little, to my heart's content one day, but that day is not today, and it's not going to be tomorrow. So I had to wrap her up, and instead of doing that, let me back up. If you go ahead and do the padded satin stitch scallops along the sleeve and the hem, you can see on the pattern that there's a little bit of a seam allowance between where the last scallop, ends and where you need to cut out your fabric. That is the seam allowance. So, so that means that you can put together your French seams that way. Your sleeve is already hemmed because of your embroidery work, as well as the hem of the gown. Like the bottom of the gown's already done because of the embroidery work. And both of those scenarios have a seam allowance, so you can just do a French seam, and basically you're done after that. There's also embroidery work around the neckline, so you can do all of that and basically just have French seams and a placket and you're done. Like I said, I didn't do that. So if you are in the boat like me where you don't want to do that either, or you ran out of time or whatever, you only have so much time to devote to a gown, what you can do instead is I just folded up the raw edge of the sleeve as well as the hem twice, and I did kind of a narrow hem on both of those, and even though it's an A-line gown, I didn't have any issues with the bottom of the gown. Okay, there's no puckers, there's no, I just gently ease the two together, and it's narrow enough that it works, and like I said, there's no puckers, there's no stretching out, it just eased together quite nicely. So I hemmed, so first I did that on the sleeve, and then I did my two French seams. Okay, so I had my sleeves hemmed first, doing the two rolled method, and then I machine stitch across the folded edge. Then I did my French seams on either side, and then I rolled up the hem on the gown twice. Like I said, I just eased that together. It went right together. It was no big deal. So then finally you'll have a placket to do, and I have a very, very detailed video that you need to go check out to do the placket. And then last but not least, I just took a 2-inch wide bias band and I used that to finish off the neckline of this. Simple as that, and then you have yourself a gorgeous little gown. So I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, put them down in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.